Well, welcome to the ccdelco podcast, everybody. I'm Bob Guaglione. I'm the senior pastor at Calvary Chapel of Delaware County. We're right outside of Philadelphia. Joining us today is a very special guest. Amir Tsarfati is here from Israel. Amir is a conference speaker and author. He guides in Israel, and he's doing some really cool things over there we want to talk about later in the podcast. Amir, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you, Pastor.
Thanks for joining us. Amir, we're having a prophecy conference in a couple days. There's going to be 1,000 people here. As you look forward to these conferences, and I know you only do a limited amount in America, what excites you most about these conferences?
What excites me most is to see the hunger in people's lives for walking with God and expecting our soon gathering to be with Him. I mean, there is eagerness that I see, and that's how a believer should live, eagerly waiting for His return.
So my mind goes back to the early 80s when I became a follower of Jesus, and we're coming out of the 70s with the Hal Lindsey books, right? He was the best-selling author of the 1970s. Not Christian author, just best-selling author. And so the Countdown to Armageddon, the late great Planet Earth. And then in the 2000s, we had the whole Left Behind Tim LaHaye series. So I remember back then, we were prophecy buffs. But in my travels, I see a little cooling down with this generation. Are you seeing otherwise?
I see the same thing.
Yeah.
I see the same thing. I do see that the people that are excited are even more excited.
Yeah.
But the general feel is that as we move into the era of social media, it's not about Jesus as much as about people. And it's about how to live your life now, how to make the most out of your life now. And more Christians are more into this lifestyle Christianity rather than the expectation for His return.
So here's what I was wondering. And I'd love to hear what you think, because you're in the East, the Middle East, we're Western. I think prosperity has overtaken us so much, and even the church, where this is almost heaven.
Yeah.
Right? Where the cry used to be, Maranatha, come quickly, Lord Jesus. We have a slice of heaven here. And for us, it's gas prices, it's the election. But there's a different view in the eastern part. Why don't you let the listeners in?
Well, it seems like, and following what you just said, even the fight right now that is led by many conservatives to not let go of freedom is not about Christian values. Yeah. It's more about I want to, control what I do, what I say, how I do things, and all of that. But COVID also showed me that Christians are willing to put their fight for, the gospel number 3 or number 4, and they don't have a problem teaming up with New Age people in order to promote other things. Yeah. And so this is what I see. I mean, the Western world is so spoiled that all he's angry about is not sin, it's the freedoms that are being taken from him. Whereas in the East, we don't understand what the problem is all about. I mean, when it comes to sometimes not being able to do some things. Okay, well, we went through many times such a thing. People cover their faces with masks in Asia for decades. Yes. They don't think that the freedom is taken from them. So again, I'm not, I hate mandates and I hate all of that, but I don't think this is our fight. This is our flag that we need to carry all the time. So the thing is, as you said, in Middle East and east of that, we are used to things that the West is being introduced to right now.
Exactly. So we're insulated by 2 oceans, right?
Correct.
We're a very prosperous nation. I remember being in Israel one time on a tour, and we were actually at Megiddo, and F-16s were flying over. And we can hear them rumbling at night. And so the next day, somebody on my tour came to my Jewish guide and said, "Are we canceling the tour today?" Because they read in the news or on the internet what had happened last night. And my guide said, "No, this is the Middle East. This is every day.
Exactly.
We go." So we're not used to what you live with, right? Yeah. threat of nuclear war, threat of invasion. Tell us a little bit about what it's like to live in that environment every day.
I live in the Jezreel Valley, Armageddon Valley. I live right next to the Israel's northernmost military air base.
Which is beautiful, by the way.
Ramat David, And so for me, not hearing them taking off, I'm wondering, is something wrong?
Yeah.
And I know something is going on if they take off at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., or on Shabbat, then you know something is going on. But it's a normal thing. We are a country that a lot of people wants to destroy, and like sovereign countries are calling for our annihilation. It's not even that. So it's. I think that what made us more innovative and more sharp. It's the fact that we cannot take our existence for granted, and I also think that. Christians should live like that. We must understand that we will never, ever, ever be accepted by the world. And every notion of thinking that, the world will fall in love with us, the world will accept us, this is wrong. This is false theology.
Right.
And so that's what should make us sharper. That should make us more focused, more, always vigilant, and unfortunately, we're more into causing the world to like us and accept us, and this is false Christianity. This is false theology. The only time we will ever be the majority, the only time, is in the beginning of the millennial kingdom. Which later on it won't be the case because there will be an uprise of great number of people. And in the New Jerusalem, which we will not be the majority, we will be everybody. That's it. Until then, we will be persecuted, we will be minority, and we will never be liked by the world.
So the majority of people, I'm sure, watching this or listening to the podcast are probably up to speed on what the Bible has to say about the end times, the rebirth of Israel, Jerusalem being a cup of trembling to the nations, etc., which is... if you just think about it, it was absurd when that prophecy was written, and then now every day in the newspapers. So, not to get political, but Netanyahu has a podcast out. It's excellent. It's about how Israel transformed from a socialist economy to a capitalistic economy, mainly so they could be strong and then convince Arab nations that they would hold Iran at bay. So... we're seeing the peace accords now. Americans are seeing, peace accords that Israel is making, the Abraham Accords. Give us your perspective on that in the modern day.
We live in very interesting time. This is a phase in history where Israel is a democracy, and it's just a phase. Biblically, we were never a democracy, and we will never be a democracy in the future.
The early people in 48 came from socialist European countries and banded together, and that's how they made it, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And it's interesting, the kibbutz movement, the kibbutzim that started in the early 1900s, up into the 1940s and 50s, admired Stalin and had Stalin's photo in their dining room of every kibbutz. Just so you understand, these are the people that are now protesting against Netanyahu as if he's not a Democrat, promoting democracy. These people are the biggest socialists and Bolsheviks, if I will even say that. However, we are in a very interesting time period that will never come back again. It has never been there before, of Israel's being a democracy, and again, it's for a reason and for a season. We must be accepted by the families of the world in order for the Jews to come back, in order for us to be strong, in order for us to prosper, and then we will have that big war that is around the corner that we're going to obviously talk about even throughout the conference. I think that before the war, there's always peace. War comes when somebody is not happy that you have peace with someone else. And what we have now that talks about normalization with the Saudis, it makes the Iranians very nervous. The Iranians feel today that they were taken advantage by the Saudis when the Saudis few months ago signed, so to speak, a peace deal with Iran under the auspices of the Chinese, if you remember that, they thought we neutralize any future agreement between the Saudis and the Americans and the Israelis. Well, all the Saudis did is just basically cause the Americans to lower the price and cause the Israelis also to even want that more. And sure enough, the Democrats who called the Saudi crown prince pariah, who after the murder of Khashoggi in the consulate in Istanbul, they held him as a murderer. Now they're running after him for peace and deal and defense bill that can only be equal to a member of NATO. And that's unheard of for the Middle East.
So we'll get back to some end times things. I want to talk about your life because it's very interesting. You're a Jew.
Yeah.
You're a follower of Christ. That doesn't happen a lot. Tell us the events that led to your conversion.
Yeah. Well, I was born to a Jewish family in the area of Jerusalem, just west of Jerusalem in a suburb. My parents, they divorced when I was less than 3 years old. Then I grew up with my aunt, and then I moved to foster care, different families. And I literally didn't like my life. It was getting from bad to worse, and from worse to almost impossible. And I thought, this is not the life I would like to live here. I don't see myself as someone who just, punch the card and say, I'm here. No, if it's not good, I don't want to be here. I wanted to check out of this world. So I carefully planned my...
How old were you at this
I was
time?
17 when I had enough... I had a stash of pills that would kill me.
My gosh.
And I was about to do it.
Wow.
Literally. And the night before I did that...
and your family practicing Jews?
Yeah, well, no. My father, when he made Aliyah when he was 10 years old, he was a yeshiva boy. But then at the age of 17, 18, he left religion and he became sort of like, just a secular Jew.
Yeah.
Whereas my mom, she came from secular Holocaust surviving family, Polish. My mom is 100% Polish, a little bit of Russian blood also. And my father originally from France, Portugal, to Northern Africa, to Tunisia, because that's where I'm called Tsarfati. Tsarfati in Hebrew means French, and because we were the French who migrated to Portugal, who then were expelled by Ferdinand and Isabel, and landed eventually in Northern Africa. So we are the French, and I wanted to kill myself. I decided that night that maybe I should give the world one last chance. And that's the week I found out that my best friend in school is actually a Messianic Jew. Because I went to his house and they all, at lunch held hands, closed their eyes, started praying without any prayer book. And, it's very weird for a Jew to see people just holding hands and praying like that. So I started asking questions, and before I knew it, they led me to Old Testament prophecies about Yeshua, about the Messiah. And then, the New Testament, I didn't want to touch it.
Right.
Honestly, I touched the New Testament for the first time after I got saved.
So what's it like for a Jew to think about the New Testament?
First of all, because you're so saturated with the Old Testament, you're so used to the Old Testament. For you, that's the Word of God. That's the Bible.
Yeah.
Bible for you is Old Testament.
Yeah.
It was hard for me the concept that the Bible is not only the Old Testament, and then the concept that there is a new thing.
Yeah.
But then once I read Jeremiah 31, that the promise of God for Israel to have a new covenant, New Testament, in Hebrew it's the same word.
Yeah.
Covenant and testament in Hebrew is the same word, brit, which means new covenant is New Testament. So I read that God is going to give Israel a New Testament, and I realized, okay, so it's not something I should stay away from. But again, my acquaintance with the Messiah was mostly through one chapter of one book of the Old Testament. That's it. And kind of what the Ethiopian eunuch had experienced in that chariot ride with Philip is that only one book. And that was enough for him to want to be baptized, and that's it. And so that's why it's very...
Did you have like a mentor, or was that family guiding you
Correct.
through? Yeah.
Yes and no. I mean, they introduced me,
Mm-hmm.
and then I started attending, Bible studies and prayer meetings and some worship time and all of that. I think everything around ministered to me more than only the teaching. It was everything. Everything looked right, sounded right. Everything was genuine, real. The first love, you don't need deep teachings to get there.
Really
That's
don't.
it.
So Philadelphia has a very large Jewish population.
Yes.
In fact, we have an extension campus in Ardmore. It's near Bryn Mawr, very Jewish. What are some tools, what advice as we encounter Jewish people? They're always shocked that at church we preach through the Old Testament. They can't understand it.
That's exactly the thing.
And prophecy is always a draw. But any little tips?
Yes, of course. I mean, one of the things that Gentile Christians don't understand is that Jews do not regard the New Testament as the Word of God. So when you come with a John 3:16 attitude, it's not going to work with a Jew.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not going to work.
Right.
But if you come with Isaiah and Jeremiah and Hosea and Micah, it can work. And in fact, they will be shocked to see how well versed you are with the Old Testament. Don't even call it the Old Testament.
Exactly.
Call it Tanakh. Call it Tanakh.
Yeah.
Call it, this is your Bible. This is the Bible. Don't worry. God will not kill you if you call the Old Testament the Bible,
Right.
because they understand what it means. And then, of course, I think that also the attitude in which we come to them, do not patronize them. Do not come with, we know better. You don't. Come with an attitude of love and respect and great knowledge of your Old Testament, because if they pull out a verse that you don't know how to deal with, then they will patronize you because we're very good in that.
Yeah.
And so I say the attitude in which we come and the knowledge of the Old Testament is essential if you want to come and evangelize to a Jew. Now, coming to world events, it's very important because Israel is a soft thing in every Jewish heart. And if you show that you love Israel, you support the Jewish people, you don't need to get into politics because most of the Jews are very liberal, so they will probably not accept current prime minister and his government. But you can talk about the right of Israel to exist in the Middle East, the fact that God has his hand over Israel, that the Jewish people, God did not change his mind about them being his people. He never replaced them with the church, and all of those things. So when you say that, they will listen to you.
So it's interesting that you bring up prophecy because that was my inroad to conversion. But it's a little different. I was more into the end times, right? So I'm Catholic, I'm nominal, but there's probably a belief in Jesus. So I'd have to be convinced that Jesus prophetically was who he said he was. I was more enthralled by the end times, what would happen in the last days. And God in Isaiah says, I am God and there is no other. I'll tell you before it comes to pass.
So 46. Yeah.
So you become a guide in Israel, tour guide. Tell us about that experience.
Well, that happened because of my last position in the military as the deputy governor of Jericho and the one that handed Jericho over to the Palestinians for self-ruling. In the interim period between us handing over Jericho and the actual Oslo Accord that was signed before, I was in charge of showing all the dignitaries and the VIPs and everyone. I had to show them the area and explain to them about the area and explain about Israel. And I realized that when they left that bus, what they know is what I told them. And I realized the importance of being there to share what Israel is all about and what really is going on, because the media, I call them the Medianites. I call them, they're out there to deceive, and they're of the enemy. So for me, it was important to show Israel to the people. That's why when I started the ministry, I call it Behold Israel, look at Israel, because it is way more than just a country, and it is everything you hear in the media is probably not what really is going on.
I'll tell you what, on our tours, people fall in love with the guides because of their passion.
Yeah.
You're right. It's not like Philadelphia, I'll take you to the Liberty Bell, I'll take you here, I'll take you there. There is a bona fide passion that God has done amazing things here, and this is a living miracle and testimony.
And it's heartbreaking to see a lot of the tour guides in Israel are liberal, but they don't. One thing they obviously will demonstrate in their guiding is their, what you said, passion, patriotism, and all of that. But I always ask them, if it's not for the Word of God and the promises of God, we really don't have a right to be here.
Yeah.
So if you're such patriots and you're so much into that right that we have to be here, you must hold on to the biblical promises of God for Israel. Otherwise, what other thing?
I had a funny experience. I was on Ben Yehuda Street, which is, they were breaking Shabbat, so it was a party scene. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a party scene. There's atheists here. There's craziness, drinking, all this going on. And we're like yards away from where the temple once stood. And that's when I realized the heart of man. Yeah. It's desperately wicked, right? Yeah. Unless God does something, your eyes are just blinded.
And even when the temple existed, I always go back to the beginning, the first 10 chapters of Ezekiel, and how even the temple was a place that eventually became
corrupt,
afflicted with corruption and paganism and all of that. So, I'm longing for the day that we will not need a temple anymore, and that's in the New Jerusalem.
So, Amir, everybody that goes to Israel has what I call an aha moment. Mine was on the Sea of Galilee. Not because of the lake itself or what Jesus had done, but I remember sitting in that boat thinking, how did God get a landscaper son from Philadelphia to the Sea of Galilee? So having seen these sites all your life and experienced it through other people, when you guide, obviously when you get off the bus in Jerusalem, it's all that, but just for the listener's sake, or for people who haven't gone yet, what are some of the aha moments in Israel? For my wife, it was Armageddon.
Really?
So for everybody, it's something different. But what do you see a lot?
Well, I'm no longer guiding tours, but when we have a tour and we bring them to the first site on our tour itinerary is Joppa, and we give them the experience of Peter in Joppa that basically opened the door for the Gentiles to be part. That is already the aha moment. And then you continue with his experience
Plus
in Caesarea.
There's that great bakery there.
Abu Lafta, yes. Yeah, and then you move on to Caesarea. I think the first day is a shocker.
Caesarea is, the cat comes right out of the bag.
And then you bring them up to Mount Carmel, and they see the valley, and they hear about it. The history of the valley. Forget about the future. The history already is so rich, and you explain the division of the land to tribes and the roads that used to be here and the importance of cities that were built on roads and all of that. It's phenomenal. I mean,
it really
it's
so everybody should go.
I think the first. I know a lot of people that told me after the first day, even if it's just for this, I can go back home.
And guess what? On some of our more ambitious trips, after Megiddo, we go to Magdala.
Oh, that's ambitious.
And right on the Sea of Galilee, and people are like, wow. One day? This is what is...
Yeah, they're overwhelmed. And, by the third, I always tell them, try not to have to write every word, just to try to retain what you can. And trust me, it'll take you 3 to 4 tours to really, truly understand everything.
Try and take all these pictures just doesn't work.
Like Pastor Chuck used to say, a tour to Israel is like a semester in Bible college.
So let's talk about that because, our roots are Calvary Chapel, Chuck Smith. A lot of people have seen Jesus Revolution. What'd you think of Jesus Revolution?
I think it's very well done.
Yeah, very well done. So, Chuck really put it in our hearts to love Israel. There's that famous scene of him sitting behind his desk and David Ben-Gurion there, 1948, announcing Israel. What was it like guiding for Chuck?
Just before I say that, I will tell you that in David Ben-Gurion's house, it's Hal Lindsey's book in the shelf.
No.
Yes. Late Great Planet Earth. Just so you see. So
No.
he was holding on to a Christian author about the end times.
My gosh.
And Pastor Chuck was holding on to what David Ben-Gurion did. So you can see.
And then a lot of people don't know when Ben-Gurion's making that statement, there's a picture of Herzl
That's
behind
true.
him. The father of Zionism.
Yes. And so, Pastor Chuck was the real deal.
Yeah.
And I miss him so much. We're approaching a 10th anniversary, if I'm not mistaken.
Was he assigned to you? Were you assigned to him?
I was assigned to, first I knew about Calvary Chapel. First time it was 1998. 97 I started full-time guiding. 98 is when I guided Calvary Chapels. And that's, by the way, my relationship with Jack Hibbs goes to 98 when he held my newborn son, who is now 25 years old. But with Pastor Chuck, it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was already 99 or 98 or 99 that I already guided him.
How many buses?
He used to bring around 10 buses. And the funny thing is, he did not assign people to buses before the tour. So, and he
We're going a different bus?
Yeah. So what the philosophy is, everyone board all buses, and then he will decide which one is his.
Interesting.
And that's it. And he will stay on that bus. And so I happened to be his tour guide, and we took off. And I remember I was drinking everything he had to say about the Bible, because it was someone who just literally read from the Bible and explained it in such an amazing way.
His famous phrase was, simply explain the Bible.
Exactly. And I remember we began to correspond with emails, no text messages or those things, emails. And I remember one time I sent him an email regarding, if I'm not mistaken, it was Psalm 72, but I have to check it, about how we can see that Jesus was there before the sun was made. So before the sun was created, because the English translation doesn't say that, only the Hebrew. So I remember we went back and forth, and then he wrote me an email and he said, how foolish it is for me to try to correct your Hebrew when you know the Hebrew much better. And I'm like, that cannot be that Pastor Chuck. I thought it's a mistake. But apparently he wrote it himself, and it was like, and I'm 20-something years old. This is the father of hundreds of churches. And so for me, it's a man that always was open to learn more and more. He never for a minute thought he knows everything. And for me, that taught me a lesson. Never ever to think that you know everything.
So in 1983, I'm a new believer. And I remember someone said, barcodes. And back then they were on cereal boxes. They didn't even check you out at the store with a barcode. One day your medical records will be in here. One day the European community was fledgling. And you look back now and you're like, nobody could have foreseen smartphones and ChatGPT and AI. And it's like everything's accelerated. And you start to look at Daniel, that knowledge would increase and people would travel to and fro. As you look at trends in 2023, tell us some of what you're seeing.
Well, in 2023, we are COVID graduates. So now we are all in agreement that we can already get to a situation when the entire world will act the same way and will go by the same guidelines.
I always said it would take a cataclysmic event to usher in what we see in the Bible as far as a one world government, et cetera, et cetera. And you're right, something a little greater than a flu almost produce
Exactly.
that. What if it affected children?
Yeah.
What if it was worse?
And
Yeah.
not only that, you see how anything against it was immediately canceled.
Exactly.
You see the control on the narrative in the media.
Yeah.
You see governments literally afraid to say anything different than other governments. It's not only the level of people. I personally know government officials that were afraid that Israel will say anything different.
Yeah.
So what the case was, with what everybody knows, we need to live and we need to act accordingly. And I don't think that leaders wanted to kill their people. I really think that leaders were genuinely interested in the well-being of their people, but I think that much higher powers were running behind the scenes, the World Health Organization and the UN, that dictated what everyone should say and how everyone should think and act. And so, a government says, who am I to decide on matters that there is a World Health Organization that knows better?
Right.
And this submission without thinking,
Incredible.
to one organization that is based in Geneva and that is not even, something that scientifically 100% accurate. That's it. That showed me that the world is ready. The world is ready.
It launched 1,000 conspiracy theories.
Yes.
And I remember someone saying a long time ago that there is no conspiracy. Man's just not that smart. There's one giant conspiracy, and we know the enemy is behind this, right? Satan.
Yeah.
The woman's tried to ride the beast for a long time, and it's going to happen, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Indeed. I always, and I taught that way before COVID. I believe that what we see is nothing compares to what really exists. And I truly believe there is a greater force of very wealthy families that are controlling international establishment that are now we know, controlling national governments that then control the people. So when you vote for your prime minister or your government, you really don't vote for, you don't know, what's coming above them. You know what you want them to do. But then once they're elected, there is a higher power above them that is not political.
Exactly.
And there is a higher power above them.
Yeah.
And so the problem of the people on the top is that they cannot convince us, the people, the dummies, how we should do things. So what they do, they apply pressure on world organizations, that apply pressure on governments that will use only crisis to get what they want from the people. But people it seems like they're pushing back. Look, the second COVID didn't work. I mean, they tried to push it in the last few months. It didn't really work.
Yeah.
It didn't catch. So there has to be something new.
Yeah.
But it's always the crisis that they take advantage of. They try to push for years the climate change. Even yesterday, the Pope once again talked about catastrophe and climate change and all of that. They try to use those things. But they have a lot of success also. A lot of success. Right now, there's no country on planet Earth that doesn't have to deal with the whole sexual identity thing.
Right.
No country around the world.
Yeah.
In fact, the UN will not help.
Yeah.
The UN will not help countries, very poor countries in Africa, unless they apply the UN agenda on sex change and LGBTQ, all of that. So, people are hungry, people are sick, people are dead, but they will not get help unless they agree on A, B, C, and D.
Yep.
And that's it.
So, Amir, for people listening, we have a view that would be called premillennial theology. A lot of Christians don't believe in that view. A lot of Christians are disenfranchised by arguments, date setting, controversies among Christians. We don't all agree on the same thing. But the divide really comes where a very large percentage of the church does not believe Israel matters. So even prominent evangelicals will say, well, it's a wonderful place to visit. There's a lot of history, but the church has replaced Israel. So, when I read the Bible, it's almost impossible to look at it that way. God said, I made a covenant with them forever. And if I forget Jerusalem, I'll have to cut my right hand. It goes on and on and on. Talk to us from a perspective of someone that lives in Israel and is Jewish about those two covenants.
My very existence as a Jew from the tribe of Judah, born in Jerusalem, in modern days, my very existence is the proof that God did not forget about Israel. And the problem of the church is insecurity. Insecurity. If God is not done with Israel, where does that put us in this whole picture?
That was my aha moment.
Yeah.
I only have one place to look to see how God treats a people group, and that's Israel.
Exactly.
And if Romans 8 is true, that he's never going to leave or forsake me, the only proof I have is what he has done to the Jewish nation.
And that's why Paul continued with Romans 9, 10, and 11, because, Paul had to deal with two things. One, if being saved by grace is the fruit of the imagination of the disciples, or if God changed his mind and he replaced Israel, then we have two problems here. Paul addressed them too in Romans 9, 10, 11. So we see that Israel has been, and will be always a stumbling block for the Gentiles. And it's very sad to see that, you could argue that until 1948. I mean, you could think that, true, look, they're gone. They're not there. God has, that's it. There's no hope for them. You can ask Martin Luther. He'll tell you exactly what he thinks about them. And then came 1948. And it's like a black eye to the Reform replacement theology movement. And ever since, they refused to look at Israel as the people of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They think that we still have, the blessing of Abraham applies, the blessing of God applies to all the sons of Abraham. They'll stop in Abraham. And this is why I like Romans 9 when he talks about sons of promise, which is from Isaac and all that. But the thing is, my point is that replacement theology existed from the very get-go of the church in the first century. Paul had to address that issue. It intensified in the second century, and it came to the heights in the 1600s as well. And it was then inspired people like Hitler to do what they do. Hitler admitted openly that he was inspired by the Reformed theology. So
I had a woman come up to me, prominent member of our church, and said, Pastor Bob, do you realize I would have never stepped foot in this church had there been a cross here? So we don't have any icons or crosses. And
that's another problem.
It's a whole nother,
Is she Jewish?
Yeah.
See?
Yeah.
You see, people don't understand that the cross is a stumbling block for the Jewish people.
Yeah.
But so many atrocities were done in the name of Jesus and with the use of the cross as the symbol. And hundreds of thousands of Jews were murdered when their murderers were either holding a cross as they did it, or had a cross decorating their uniform as they did,
or their shield.
Yes.
Yeah. So, Amir, for some of our Muslim friends that may be watching, Islam. Hal Lindsey struggled with Islam, trying to explain it. I have Muslim friends who have become Christians, wonderful people. You're surrounded by Islam in a much different way than we are. Talk about how Islam fits into the end time scenario and maybe what you might share with some Islam friends of Islam that are watching.
First of all, I think that there are so many Muslims that are disappointed with the holy wars of Islam in modern days.
Yeah.
I think that many of them realize that it's not working.
Yeah.
They also are disappointed with the bad rep that those extremists are giving
them.
Muslims.
Yeah.
I also believe that Muslims overall wants to be accepted and wants to be loved. Like, it's a human thing. And this is exactly the strategy, I believe, of the New World religion, is to cause you to feel accepted and loved without necessarily holding on to a specific way, truth, and life.
Yeah.
And Jesus is going to be thrown out of the window, and because that is thrown out of the window, we can accept your way and their way and his way and that way. And all of us, as long as we, stand together, we can beat it up and make a wonderful way forward for millions around the world to hold hands and sing Kumbaya. But the thing is with Muslims is that they cannot shake off the radicals from them. And it's only going to intensify to the point that, and you see that embodied in a country like Iran or in organizations like ISIS and like Al-Qaeda and others. I believe that this is exactly what Ezekiel's war is going to bring an end to. It's the radical Islamic agenda that is out there to join forces with Russia to destroy Israel. And when they will be humbled by the God of Israel and destroyed and defeated by the God of Israel, that's when I believe it'll give a backwind to the rise of the Antichrist, but also to hundreds of millions of Muslims to ask themselves, okay, where are we going from here? And because, Turkey as the mother of Sunni Islam, that's what they see themselves, at least. And they were the caliphate.
Yeah.
The last caliphate was there.
Yeah.
And Iran is the mother of Shiite Islam, and all the radical organizations that will come from Sudan and Libya join forces with Russia and try to destroy us. And they will be humbled not by the soldiers of Israel, not by the generals of Israel, not by the government of Israel, but by the God of Israel in a very supernatural way.
Yeah.
That's what that war is all about.
Yeah.
And so they will ask themselves, where are we? What are we doing? There will be a crisis of faith to so many hundreds of millions of Muslims, I believe. And the rise of the Antichrist is always, parallel to the rise of the one world religion. That will facilitate his beginning, and then he will not need it anymore. But the thing is, in order to do that, you have to come to a major crisis. And that major crisis, I see it embodied in that war.
Yeah, so this is going to be a man of pure genius, right? He has to find a way to bring peace to that area. And we know Israel has to be deceived, right?
Yeah.
Jesus said, I came in my name, you didn't receive me. There will come one in his name, you will receive. Pure conjecture, the possibilities of how does that peace happen?
It's interesting because we will be after a major war. We will be exhausted. We will be, very, very much in awe at the way that we were actually survived this whole thing. There will be messianic aspirations, but they will be channeled to the wrong place. Because, obviously God is going to win the war for us. And if God is going to win the war for us, and a peace agreement will be formed that will, for the first time in 2,000 years, allow us to build a temple. Can you imagine?
Seems impossible.
Yeah. But how the Jews will feel, okay, these are Messianic times, Messianic eras. And so if there will be a man that will be rising to that level of authorizing us to build it, and later on he will come, who knows, maybe to inaugurate it, and then,
it's going to be pure genius.
People don't understand when we reach Revelation 13, that's the midpoint of the tribulation. It's not that this is the first time we hear about him and he will now become, he already was the first writer. Chapter 6 already described, he started as a one who brings peace. He was the one that the people will like. Later on, he will demand them to worship him. It's a different story. But people will like him. People will like what he's doing. They'll fall for him. And when the Jewish people see who he really is, that's when don't even go and pack your things. Just flee. Run, because that's too late.
So, Amir, whenever it comes to prophecy or the end times, there's always people like I was just getting started. Some people are in the middle. Some people are well read. Tell us about your books, your ministry, and I'm really excited about the center you're trying to build. Tell us about some of that.
So I started by writing a few years ago my testimony, as well as how I see the Bible unfolding. And it was a book called The Last Hour. And then it continued with more teachings on what we see in the world in the recent times. And it's called The Day Approaching. It's all based, of course, on Hebrew, that we see the day approaching. But then I wrote a book that explains the difference between Israel and the church, that Israel did not replace the church did not replace Israel. Israel is not the church is not Israel, and the two. And that was a work that I had to take it off my chest, because it bothered me for the longest time, the way people teach. And then the Lord spoke to me that there's out there so many people that they love news, they love what's going on around the world, but they will never set their foot in a Christian bookstore to buy some theological. So
Is that the book on Revelation that you wrote?
Not yet.
Yeah,
So that's when I began a series of fiction thrillers.
Oh, that's
based on Mossad operations.
Yeah, that's right.
Based on real events.
Yeah.
And yesterday we launched the third one.
Nice.
Yeah. And then came Revealing Revelation.
So like a verse by verse.
Yes. Revealing Revelation, it's like a tour guide. I took them on a tour through
really
Revelation.
Good. Really good. For somebody getting their feet wet, it's excellent.
Yes. Yeah. It's not, the deepest.
No.
But it's again, for the lay Christian to even no longer be afraid of that book and to finally understand, I think it's. And then after that, we added a second thriller, another book that came to explain that we're not yet in the tribulation. Has the tribulation begun? Yeah. Because people thought that's it, we're in the tribulation. And I explained what it means. The tribulation has to happen only when ABC happens. We don't know the day and the hour of the rapture, but we sure know when the tribulation begins, with the rise of the Antichrist, and give them. And then I just released the third thriller, and I am busy writing a sequel to Revealing Revelation.
So share with everybody the name of your ministry.
Behold Israel.
And just type that
BeholdIsrael.org is the website. We are on social media. I also started a Telegram news channel that has over 300,000 subscribers.
Nice.
It's really where you get news first, and you get accurate news, because I'm fed up with.
And you're trying to build an education center?
Well, we're building a place where in 2024 I decided to take a sabbatical from traveling and teaching around the world, and we're building a place that will educate the local believers, mostly on Bible prophecy. The Israelis are not into that.
I know.
Even the body of Christ, not just the Israelis. The body of Christ is not into Bible prophecy at all. So I want to introduce that to them. And I also want to be a place where non-believers can walk in and hear. And I'll have my books translated to Hebrew as well. And
if we were on a Bible tour, we could stop by.
Yes, obviously we have to coordinate it that I'll be there. Yes, by all means, but not more than one bus. We don't have a huge place. But I will also be more available to do stuff online and to try to enlarge the reach to many more places.
Well, Amir, God has really used you. Your journey is fascinating. And I've always said it, there's more teaching on Bible prophecy in the last 100 years than the history of the church. I feel like God's building an ark for this generation. And people want to know, where do we come from? Where are we going? They're trying to make sense of the world, and the answers aren't out there. So
the problem is that there's a lot of sensationalism.
there really is.
And because of that, people are getting anxious.
Exactly.
And in fact, the whole idea of teaching Bible prophecy is to give you hope.
Exactly.
It's to give you comfort. Comfort
Yes.
one another with these words.
Yeah.
So that's what we aim to do.
Thanks for all you do. Thanks for
very
being
much.
here. This is the ccdelco podcast. You could check out other things we do. We have a podcast called Reasons We Believe. We always love when you join us. So check us out on Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts.